Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave.
At this time, I have the honor to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
I am happy to join with you today and what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon of light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still badly crippled by the manacles of segregation. And the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, it is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this seared obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. Now is the time to make a justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hoped that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening, and the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. And that is something that I must say to my people. who stand on the warren's threshold, which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we might not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. No, sir. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to distrust of our white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied with our destiny. They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating, "For whites only."
We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro in Mississippi has nothing to vote and believes he has nothing for which to vote. We cannot be satisfied as long as the one in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied. And we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here today out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come back from the storms of persecution. Some of you have come from the quest for freedom, which has left you battered by the storms. You have been the veterans of creative service. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to New York. Go back to the slums and ghettos of the northern cities. I tell you today, go back. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities. Knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friends, even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of this creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men, yes, black men as well as of Georgia, sons of former slaves and sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even in the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, a state sweltering with the heat of oppression. I have a dream today. I have a dream that this state in Mississippi will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin. I think I didn't say that just one more time. I have a dream that one day in this nation, my little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by their color, but they will be judged by the content of their character. I have a dream that one day deep down in Alabama, with this vicious racist, one day right down there with their lips filled with interposition and nullification, even with this governor having his lips dripping with interposition. One day right there down in Alabama, little black boys and little black girls will be able to join hands as little black girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, deep down in every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places shall be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all of flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we'll be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. See, with this faith, we'll be able to struggle together. We'll even be able to work together. Even be able to pray together. And then we'll be able to go to jail together. And even stand up for freedom together. One day, this situation can and will be changed. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. I said land where my fathers died. Land where the pilgrims cried. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. Let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the highland alleghanies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the Cabeza slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. I said from every mountainside, just let freedom ring. We will allow freedom to ring. When we let it ring from every city and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we'll be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, I said all of God's children, black men as well as white men, little black girls and little black girls, little black boys, Protestants and Catholics, Jews and Gentiles, we'll be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It goes just a little bit like this.
Go ahead. A little bit.
Free at last. Free at last. Free at last.
Free at last.
Free at last.
Free at last.
Daniel,